up, Menopod? Welcome to another fun-filled episode of the Menopause Movement Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. G. It may be the depths of winter when you're listening to this, but as I'm recording it, it's the beginning of fall, and temperatures are dropping. The air conditioning is off now. And what I love about the fall is the cool mornings and warm afternoons. It's always been my favorite time of year. Add in football and the changing leaves, and it's just the perfect time of year for me. Speaking of football, you may or may not know, I grew up in Washington State. And when we got our very own professional football team, so many of us were really excited. I've been a fan of the Seattle Seahawks since the franchise's inception in 1976. Of course, those were the days of Roger Staubach and the Dallas Cowboys and Terry Bradshaw of the Pittsburgh Steelers fighting it out for dominance. Football's been a big part of my life for as long as I can remember. And while I don't love going to live games because of crowds and the cold, I make it a point to get NFL Sunday tickets so I can watch each and every Seahawks game that's broadcast nationally. In fact, it's common to see me running in my neighborhood with my Seahawks gear. I love them even when they have a bad season. And running in the fall is the best because it's not too hot, it's not too cold. Running in the winter in New York can be challenging, though, because it gets super cold and then you sweat. Now, something I've started to notice more when I'm running is my breath. How is my breathing? Is it labored? Is it difficult or steady and easy? As I continue my physical training, I've realized I need to really pay attention to my breathing and not just when I'm running. Today, we're going to be talking about breathing with sought-after spiritual teacher, personal transformation coach, and leading voice in the breathwork community, Christian de la Huerta. Christian has traveled the world offering inspiring and transformational retreats combining psychological and spiritual teachings with inspiring and changing effects. He's an award-winning and critically acclaimed author and TEDx speaker. His new book, Awakening the Soul of Power, was described by multiple Grammy Award winner Gloria Estefan as a balm for the soul of anyone searching for truth and answers to life's difficult questions. Transformation is something we all seek at various times in our lives, and sometimes we think we have to give something up or start something new or think and act in a way that feels foreign to us, but transformation is possible. But it won't never happen overnight. It takes time. The first step to change, of course, is making the decision to change. But then, of course, we have to back that up with action. And that's the biggest challenge. How do we take action? And even more importantly, what specific actions should we take? The menopause movement is here to help you with all of that. Menopause can be a time of misery or a time of unapologetic action toward creating a life we love. Again, I woke up in the middle of my menopause journey hating myself, my body, and the life I had created. I didn't know what to do, and I went on a quest to find out how to make change happen. And the result was the menopause movement and this podcast. The menopause movement has one purpose: to help end the suffering caused by menopause through transformational education and coaching. And we want to help you too. So head on over to menopausemovement.com, take the quiz there. And not only will you discover your type, but we'll also tailor some offerings to help you take your life back from menopause. Getting into the driver's seat of my life was the first step I took to overcome the changes and challenges I experienced with menopause. But I did it alone, and it was lonely, and it took a lot of time. The menopause movement has created a community of women who are unapologetically deciding to become their best selves, one small action at a time. And you can too. Join our community and start to create a life you love. On today's show, we talk about Christian's mission and how he got started. Healing past traumas with breathwork. Why we need a guide to get started with transformational breathwork. Breathwork versus conventional modalities like cognitive behavioral therapy. Breathwork versus meditation. Reconciling Western religion, spirituality, and sexual orientation. Where is the sacred and how to access that? Stepping into power And stay to the end for a powerful guided meditation. At the end of the episode, visit menopausemovement.com/podcast, where you can find the show notes plus the links to the books and resources mentioned in the episode. And if you enjoy this episode, leave a written review, like and subscribe, and to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, so you're always the first to know when each episode is released. Let me know who we should have on the podcast. What can we do to make it better? We want to hear from you. Please send an email to me, Dr. Gordon, at menopausemovement.com. Christian, welcome to the Menopause Movement Podcast. I'm so happy to have you here today. We are going to talk about awakening your soul. So I'm super stoked about that. So tell me, what I want to know from you to get started is, how did you get into this work?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show, Dr. G. It's been looking forward to having this conversation with you. I've been doing this kind of personal transformation work for the last 30 plus years. And I think it's one of those things that was always in me that was going to manifest itself in different ways. So like flashing all the way back, I thought I was going to be a priest when I was in high school. So there was always that sense of wanting to serve others, to make a difference, to serve the sacred as I've understood that at different points in my life. Then my dad was a psychiatrist. My degree's in psychology. So I didn't want to go to med school. So I went.
Good
I was
choice.
going to get I was going to get a PhD in psychology, but once I discovered breathwork as an alternative healing modality, I jumped tracks. I never went for the PhD.
So what is breathwork?
It's a very broad umbrella term. There's a lot of different breathing practices and different techniques. Anybody who's ever gone to a yoga class knows that there's a lot of different practices. Some are for relaxation, for stress reduction, for sleeping better. Some are more energizing and more focusing, something the type of thing you want to do right before reaching for the cup of coffee in the afternoon after lunch. The type of breath work that I'm talking about it's longer, it's more intense. You do it for about an hour. You breathe in a circular, connected way for about an hour and a half. Some modalities even go longer. You breathe for about 3-4 hours even. And amazing stuff happens, Dr. G. It's like I don't know anything more effective in terms of healing past trauma, in terms of clearing suppressed stuff that we never worked through, than that. And I know it sounds too good to be true, because it heals not only mentally and emotionally, but also spiritually and even physically. And yes, even 30 years later, that still sounds too good to be true to the more skeptical, scientific, rational part of my mind, but I can't argue with the results. It worked.
Can you just give us some examples of what you mean by it working?
Yeah, well, I'll give you, like, for me, the one that's most difficult to understand and accept is the physical healing. I have
Okay.
so many examples of that, but let me give you my favorite stories. My teacher, the woman that I learned this from, 30 more than 30 years ago, when she was doing her first session, she was doing a one-on-one session. You could do it one-on-one, you can do it in groups. And at some point, she was on the floor doing this breathing, and she heard the facilitator snap her fingers. And for some reason, it triggered this memory she forgot about. When she was 5, she got into an argument, I forgot about what, with her daddy, and she got in a huff, and she was going to run away from home, and she got on her little bike and started pedaling about a block down. She hit something and fell over and broke her nose and was black and blue for like 3 weeks. At the end of the session, she turned to the woman and she goes, "How did you know? You had such presence and intuition to snap your fingers at that moment, because it triggered this thought that I'd forgotten about, and then I made all these connections about how that experience impacted my relationship with men." And the woman's like, "I didn't snap my fingers." So as they
Oh,
kept on,
wow.
I know what they figured out happened as they kept on talking was what she'd heard was the cracking of the bone. And the
Mm.
next day, so 40 years later, at 45, she got up in the morning and looked in the mirror and was black and blue all over again. Not for 3 weeks, but for a couple of days while the body corrected itself and healed itself. And so it goes to show how the body holds on to trauma and how it heals itself. And but then to make the leap as to how breathing can heal that, that's a whole other conversation.
Well, I mean, but I think that's a conversation we should have. We know from research that the body keeps the score. We know this from Bessel van der Kamp's lab, and I've interviewed on this podcast somebody who worked in his lab, Deirdre Fay, and she's written a book called Becoming Safely Embodied. And we know that the body remembers, and the problem
Yeah.
is accessing the memories. And so if you're saying that doing certain types of breath work can cause some healing, does it need to be guided, or can we show the people who are, tuning into this podcast a way to kind of maybe get some help, some healing right now?
Well, I would recommend that the first 5 sessions, 10 sessions be done with a professional. The reason for that is that it can be profoundly cathartic. Like people, have remember stuff that in many cases have they've forgotten about or they suppressed effectively. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really
Mm-hmm.
good to have somebody to hold the space with them and to be able to just having the presence of somebody else with you makes a huge difference. Like for example, the people who train with me to become breathwork facilitators, they have different requisites to complete as part of
Mm-hmm.
their program. 99% of them, what they resist, what they struggle with, is the self-guided sessions because it's just us and our breath. And for most
Mm-hmm.
of us, that can be a little intimidating. I mean, it's and that I don't want to scare people about it because it's an incredible process. In addition to all the healing, it can provide some of the most ecstatic, indescribable experiences that I've ever had, and many other people have had as well. People often report experiences of feeling at one minute, what are called unitary experiences, of feeling the interconnectedness of all life, feeling that we belong to something greater, to that people have loved ones, who've passed, show up and have experiences of connection and communication and forgiveness. People often report, divine visitations, whether it's angels or Mother Mary or the Buddha or Ganesha. Um, I can't promise that because that depends on how open anybody is to that on any given day.
Mm-hmm.
But it happens so frequently, I can't argue with it. And
Sure.
and and even in my case, like even if I want to go to like max skepticism, I say, is it just what's really going on? Is it my misfiring brain neurons that are having me have these memories and these awarenesses? And then I ask myself, well, even if I'm making it up, so what? Right? If it works, like I'm telling you, lives change in one session. And so if it works, it's like I don't care as long as it works.
So there's a couple questions I want to ask you about this. One of them is how is this different, say, from cognitive behavioral therapy or EMDR?
Well, EMDR is similar, right? Because EMDR bypasses the thinking mind. And that's the reason why I, jumped tracks, why I never went for the PhD in psychology and the psychotherapeutic approach. And with all due respect, I'm not knocking psychotherapy generally. In the right hands with clear goals, it can be profoundly healing and very helpful and transformational. And we all know you can sit on somebody's couch for 5, 10, 20, 30 years because they come to me at a
Mm-hmm.
time rehashing the same old crap and nothing happens. The reason
Yeah.
for that is that understanding what happened to us when we were 5 or 10 or 15 or whenever is good. And it definitely beats not knowing and suppressing it. And but the reason that it can fall short is because that trauma no longer lives in the head. It has been somaticized, so it's stuck in the tissues of the body, and that's why techniques like breathwork or EMDR that bypass the mind and go to the source of the trauma in the body and clear it. That's why they are so effective, and it's a great adjunct. Like I have a lot of therapists who send people to me when their clients are stuck or when they're plateaued.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
because
So,
it's good to have the understanding. It's good to have the
yeah.
cognitive understanding for sure.
So when you read the spiritual teachers, they all talk about, breath. Breath is the sacred thing. Um, I, I do think that even Jesus talked about breath, but I think it got kind of pulled out of.
Hmm.
Thanks to Constantine, all the
Yeah,
yoga got removed from the Bible.
yeah, yes.
Um,
Reincarnation got removed
yeah,
from.
yeah. If our connection to the divine truly is breath, that's like if you study religion, that is like the one constant, right? That breath is the
Yeah,
connection to the divine. It's the life source. This is how you do
yeah.
it. Watching this or listening to this podcast, how can they get started if it's something that they've never done before? I mean, we all know that, if you want to meditate, you sit and you focus on your breath and you let your thoughts go, right? But focusing on your breath and doing breath work are two different things.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm really glad you brought that up because you're absolutely right. The science isn't there yet to explain how it works. They haven't studied breathwork in the same way that there's so much research done on meditation and what's happening in the brain when we meditate. I think they're going to start doing more and more of that with the breath. But
Mm-hmm.
so understanding how it works for me, it's more from what's available to us now is more from a psycho-spiritual perspective, and it begins with what you just said, right? That is the one constant in just about every religion or every spiritual tradition, and even more so, like if we think about it, in most spiritual traditions and in several secular languages, the same word, one word, can mean spirit or breath. So,
Mm-hmm.
so for example, in from the ancient Greek pneuma, from which we get pneumonia, that word meant both lung and soul. And from the Latin root spirare, we get both respiration and inspiration or expiration. And here's my favorite one. In Hawaiian, ha means that, breath and spirit. And not only that, but they have a word that they use, kind of a derogatory term for foreigners, um, for the colonizers, who they called howlers. And what that word literally means is no breath.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing? And
Yeah.
so so that's how I understand, how I can explain how it works. When we do this type of breathing in a circular connected way, we're flooding the body with the universal life force, called prana in Sanskrit, or
Prana.
chi or ki, and that energy, that intelligence of life courses through the meridians, for which that we do have scientific evidence for as of a couple of years ago. So what
Mm-hmm.
Eastern medicine has known, the meridians, now Western medicine has found proof of. And so that energy courses through the meridians, the energy channels in the body, until it hits a block, an energetic block, and it begins to dissolve it and to clear it. And that's where those traumas live. That's where all those suppressed emotions live. Because what used to be spiritual teaching, that everything is energy, now we know from physics, from quantum
Yeah.
physics, that it's true. It's all energy, including our bodies that feel solid. They're just energy. The word vibration. That means
Right.
the emotions are energy too. And so, just because of the countless times in our lives that we have swallowed our emotions, that we overrode what we felt, because we were afraid of conflict or we didn't want to rock the boat too much. Every time we stuff all that stuff, it doesn't go away. We can't sweep it under the rug. It gets stuck in the tissues of our bodies. And what happens after a lifetime, after decades of suppressing our emotions, we walk around with layers upon layers upon layers of repressed emotional crap. And then here we are
Mm-hmm.
trying to have a relationship in the present moment. All of it is getting filtered through that lifetime of unhealed past trauma and repressed emotions. Like, yikes, I don't know how any relationships can work because
Yeah.
we haven't been taught how to hold them, how to approach them, how to hold them in a healthy way, and we certainly haven't been taught how to clear ourselves of these cauldron of repressed emotions that we walk around with and then start dumping on each other's lap.
Yeah.
Thinking that we're having an argument in the present, but it all goes back to some unresolved part of our past. It's like, yikes. Well, the good news
Right.
is
Well,
that there
I mean,
is,
that's what I want to say is that, as we grow up, we have layers and layers and layers of, you can call it trauma or you can call it hurts or whatever. And we can only see our lives based on the filter of our experiences. I mean, that's how we live. And
That's right.
so, if there is a way to clear it, I think that anyone who's listening to this will find it quite enlightening, because to be able to clear away past hurts through understanding how to breathe, that makes that's huge, right?
It is huge. It is huge.
Yeah,
And it's mind-boggling. Like I feel even 30 years later of offering it all over the world,
yeah.
I'm still humbled. Like it just every time I witness somebody heal some trauma that then is going to have an impact on all of their relationships. It's it's just like wow. I mean, I don't even have the words. It's
Yeah.
humbling. It's a state of grace.
So,
Um,
one thing I talk about a lot is the fact that I was an atheist for a while. And
mhm,
I was raised Catholic, and then I got into some Protestant stuff in high school and became kind of a Jesus freak. And then I went
mhm,
to Los Angeles, and in the 80s, and there was a lot of I was doing like the Vineyard Church stuff, which was it's just there was a lot of really weird spiritual stuff that happened in the 80s, and we had I got into some of the some of the more mystical side of Christianity at that time. It didn't involve any breath work. It was just accessing, you know, the spiritual, I guess, the for lack of a better word, the occult, but not the evil side, I guess. And then I realized that I was gay. I mean, I finally like said, okay, I really am. This is really who I am, and there was no place for me in the Christian church. And I was like, well, I'm just going to reject the whole thing. And then I read this book by this guy by the name of Paramahansa Yogananda,
mm,
called Autobiography of a Yogi, and it made all the whole Jesus story make sense to me. It's like, where was Jesus between the ages of 13 and 33? Oh, well, maybe he was studying to be a yogi. And and it made sense to me. And then I wanted to understand Kriya. I wanted to figure out how to breathe that way. And I did, but I've never had a, a profoundly spiritual experience in doing Kriya. So, yeah, so it's just really interesting, because through menopause specifically, I had this existential crisis about like the life I was in and how I was so unhappy with it. And it was starting a spiritual practice that made everything different for me.
mm.
So what kind of recommendation would you say for someone who's maybe, kind of having an existential crisis? Someone who listens to this podcast, primarily a woman between the ages of 45 and 60, who may be like looking at, man, my life just isn't working right. What can I do?
Yeah, that is such a profound question, Dr. G. And my heart goes out to you. I totally relate to that experience as having been raised in the Catholic tradition as a gay man, as a gay boy,
Yeah.
from a very young age, and trying to reconcile that longing, that desire to serve God, to serve the sacred as I understood it back then. At the same time that I was being told by the religion in which I was raised that I was an abomination in the eyes of God, that I was going to burn in hell for eternity. It's like, yikes. No wonder my adolescence was one long depression with suicidal ideation and
Yeah.
suicidal fantasies. And so if we're going to talk about God as a white old man with a long beard and micromanaging and busybody and judgmental and punitive, then I'm an atheist too. So, but it's like we're going to talk about abominations. I don't believe in abominations, but if I were, what to me is an abomination is the externalization of the sacred. What
Mm.
many religions have done, which is created an intermediary, created a separation between us and the sacred. How much
Hmm.
further could we have placed heaven? And where the hell is heaven anyway? And it is from that we treat, the body, we animalized it. The anything of the physical, we turned into something to be conquered and subjugated and controlled. We
Yeah.
animalized the body, we demonized sexuality. So no wonder we have sexual issues as a species, and no wonder we treat the planet the way that we do. It's like So to me, like step one for anybody who's in an existential crisis is to wait a minute, go within, because that's where all the answers are. Go within. So pause, like take a little time from the insanity of the busyness of our ADD society and go within. Um, and do whatever you got to do to realize, and I mean not just understanding it conceptually, but to have an experience of that, of our interconnectedness of the sacred with the sacred. Uh, because if we're even going to go with what the Western religions claim, that God is omnipresent, that God is
Mhm.
everywhere, but don't tell me that God is everywhere except for the bedroom and the genitals, right?
Right.
It's either everywhere or it's not.
Yeah, I mean, even Yogananda says to transmute your sexual power, your sexual energy, transmute it. And so I think, and even those people who go into, becoming monks or nuns within self realization fellowship, I think part of it is celibacy. So there is some weirdness around sex for everyone, and I don't understand why. It makes no sense. I mean, it's crazy to me. But one thing that Yogananda does show throughout all of his work is that God is accessible to anyone, and it isn't even about gender. God is, I mean, he Yogananda talks about God as a male, but I think that is just because we live in a patriarchy.
Hmm.
But if God is, he also talks about God being mother as well. So what I've discovered in my spiritual or quest, as it were, is that the more I sit still, the more I can have access to God, and that if John 1:1 is correct, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, right?
Hmm.
Then what happened was God was, and then God wanted to observe itself, and here we are.
Right.
And each one of us has access to the divine inside of us. And that makes a hell of a lot more sense to me than having to, be redeemed from my sins through the blood of somebody who, you know, was martyred.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you.
Yeah, it just, and that's not to say I'm not putting down the Christian religion. I understand the Christian religion, and I think there's a lot of validity to it. But I think that if you really want to grow spiritually, one thing that's really important is to learn how to connect to your breath. There's a really good book by James Nestor called Breath,
Yes,
that I
yes.
recommend. That you could, that's a good way to get started. But I would love it if you could walk us through some sort of an exercise.
It's just as simple. If we pause for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 3 times a week, right? Because the human nature thing is so great. Okay, well, after listening to Dr. G and Christian talk, I'm going to meditate an hour a day, every day, and then we set up. So that's not realistic, right? It's not at first. So we set ourselves up for failure, and then we miss one day, and then
Mm-hmm.
we miss 2 days, and then we say, well, screw it, this isn't working. And so I would much rather that we start manageable, bite-sized steps. 10 minutes a day, 3 times a week, right? Sit by yourself, sit comfortably, whether you sit on a meditation cushion on the floor or you sit in a chair. With the important thing is that your spine is straight. Um, and then just close your eyes. And there are many different types of ways of going within, whether it's repeating a mantra to give the mind of something to focus on, whether it's some people count their breath. To me, what I do is just observing, right? Just watching my inhale and watching my exhale. And 90% of the time is going to be like, oh, there I am watching my breath, repeating a mantra. And oops, there I go, doing my shopping list, back to the breath. Oh, there I with rehashing a conversation with my partner from last night. Whoop, back to the breath. Or there it is, futurizing, planning what I'm going to tell my boss when I have the meeting tomorrow morning, back to the breath. But even that, right, that practice of sitting ourselves and watching our breath, watching our thoughts, watching the emotions that are coursing, that is like practicing. That's like running the
Mm-hmm.
the the 5K so that one day we can do a marathon. Because when the rubber hits the road and we're about to get into an argument with our spouse, or we're about to have this important meeting with the boss, and the boss is like gonna just said something to us the wrong way, that's when that moment, that all that practice comes in, helpful. That's when it becomes helpful, because that's when we can nip it at the bud. Say, oh, there it is.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
getting,
that's
I'm
yeah.
getting triggered.
That's so
Yeah,
I think this is so important because here at the Menopause Movement we are all about progress over perfection. And we
there you go.
don't we don't we don't ever say that you have to change everything all at once, because every time you try to do everything all at once, then that's just a big setup for failure. We talk a lot about how to make small deliberate changes. And so if you want to start a meditation practice, then I mean for me I started with 1 minute at a time. Just 1 minute.
Start there. Exactly.
Yeah, and then I would up it to 5, and then eventually I think I got to an hour. And I'm not there now. Now I'm doing like 10, 15 minutes at a time, and that just happens to be where I am right now. But the main thing is to not judge yourself. And the other thing that I think can be really hard is if you have a really profound experience when you're sitting and meditating, to not think that that's the goal every time.
Right.
But each time is just to access, because we're never taught in America how to train our brains. We're taught how to be factory workers.
Exactly.
And we have to be responsible for our own outcomes. And we talk a lot about responsibility and personal responsibility, particularly in order to create a life we love through menopause, because menopause lasts the rest of our lives. And one of the tools that we can start to use is meditation and paying attention to our breath. So I'd really love it if, before we close, if you could just walk us through an exercise.
Sure. Um, and by the way, that just reminded me that I'm so glad you mentioned that about not chasing the high of meditation. When I first started
Mm.
meditating 30 years ago, I was in LA. I was actually in Redondo Beach for about 6 months. And I was
Yeah.
sitting in my meditation cushion, and nothing had happened. And then I hear, oh my God, I felt something. And oh my God, something happened. And then I realized that it was a tremor. It's like,
Oh, it's like an earthquake or something?
like an earthquake, like a mini earthquake tremor.
In Los
Uh,
Angeles, there's a lot of earthquakes. I used to live in Los Angeles. There's a lot of earthquakes.
yeah,
That's pretty
yeah,
funny.
yeah.
Something
That
happened.
just
I mean,
cracked me up.
I've had some times where, like when I was just getting started teaching the program that's now become the Mental Mastery Academy. When I went to teaching the personal mastery side of that, I meditated before I recorded it, and I had a profound experience. It was joy. There was just and I've never had it since, and not the same sort of way. I mean, I sit and I wait for it, but just I had this massive joy, and then I recorded this one session, and it was just really amazing, and it was
Yeah,
scary.
yeah. Sure.
But at the same time, whenever you do something that's new, you're kind of moving outside your comfort zone, and that can be, profound and scary at the same
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, there were so many
So
points of confluence in the way that you and I talk and teach, like, comfort zone and
yeah,
personal accountability is key to freedom.
yeah.
And yeah, and that's, by the way, returning to breathwork for a second. Um, I can't tell you how many times people have told me I've been sitting on a meditation cushion for 20 years, 30 years to have that moment of no mind, because it takes us,
Mm.
it's like shortcut to those high meditative states. It doesn't replace the benefit of a regular meditation practice, like, but because of the way that we were just talking about it, but it makes it possible to access those states more easily.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, Adyashanti wrote this really great book called Pure Meditation, and that really helped me understand that at the end of it, it's just awareness.
Yes,
And because we talk to ourselves, but we also observe the voice that's talking to us.
yes, yeah,
And so, who's observing that voice? And that's, and if you really want to get into what that is, I mean, read Mickey Singer's book. Michael Singer, the Untethered Soul. I had to read that book like 6 times before it started to sink in. That's a hard book to read. But let's do a quick breathwork exercise. I think that would be really helpful to anyone who's, you know, here today.
Okay,
And yeah,
sure. So yeah, just sit comfortably wherever you are and close your eyes, unless you're driving, in which case, of course, definitely don't close your
yeah,
eyes. But begin to bring attention to your breath, like just noticing, just breathing normally, except you begin to notice the breath. You begin to notice your inhale and your exhale. And as you do that, you might begin to notice that there's subtle nuances, subtle differences between them. So maybe the temperature is different, or maybe where the air caresses the roof of your mouth or the back of your throat is slightly different as it comes in or out or your body. And that simple process of noticing the breath begins to deepen our connection with it. And as we do that, we begin to relax. And we allow ourselves to follow the breath, to be guided by the breath, deeper and deeper within ourselves. As we dive into that vastly unexplored universe inside each one of us. And all it takes is breathing and letting go. And so, yeah, sometimes I use the visual of holding hands with the breath. So as we allow the breath to deepen, right? So we start breathing deeper in the body. So maybe from the upper chest and the throat. The next breath, we relax a little bit more and breathe all the way down into the heart center. In fact, if you're somewhere where you can do so, it's good to place the palm of your hand right over your heart center, right there at the point where the sternum, right over the sternum, where the rib cages meet. So breathe down into that a few times, and then maybe the next couple of breaths go down, all the way down into the belly. And just keep relaxing. All you got to do for the next minute or so, the next few moments, is follow your breath. There is nothing else to do. To go deeper and deeper and deeper still. To breathe down even lower, as low as you can go. And in the process, we're allowing ourselves to be breathed by the holy breath, right? The life-giving breath. And there's no dogma necessary. There's no need to believe in anything. Right? All that is required is that we breathe and that we allow the breath to breathe us, that breath that is honored and acknowledged and referenced in most spiritual traditions. To allow ourselves to be filled, to be animated by that. And so, allowing that process to continue. And the more that deeper we breathe, the more that we relax. And there's swamis in India that have that much control over their physical bodies that they can tell the heart to slow down, and it does. They can actually mimic states that are almost indistinguishable from death. Like most of us aren't there yet, may never be there, but any one of us can do what we're doing right now, which is to pause and slow down the breath. Just allow it, because that's what the breath wants to do. The breath wants to breathe us fully, completely. And so what we do in these moments is just let go of any resistance to that. Right? And let go of the stress that keeps us from being able to allow the breath full access. Right? Let go of all the worries. They'll be there in a minute if you want to pick them up again and worry, knock yourself out. For now, just for the next few moments, we'll let it all go. All of it. And all we have to do is breathe and allow ourselves to be breathed. And another visual that works for me is to imagine, like, I come from an island environment, so deep connection with the ocean. So imagine the inhale, it's like a wave coming into shore, gentle wave, right? And as that breath comes into us, it's like a wave that fills us with life force and energy and power. And then as it recedes, as the exhale begins to leave our body, we allow it, we imagine it taking it with it, anything that no longer belongs in our bodies, anything that no longer belongs in our lives. Right? And we continue that process for a few more deep, deep breaths. So with the inhale, we fill ourselves with life force and energy and power. And then with the exhale, let go of anything, right? Like starting with stress, starting with worries, just let it go. And another deep, 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 deep breath. And if you want to go deeper, let go of any old and tired beliefs or patterns of thinking, relationship patterns, behaviors that might be self-defeating or self-sabotaging. Any remnants of belief that we're not good enough, that there's anything wrong with us, that we're too much of this, not enough of that. That's the kind of stuff that we can let go of, that we can choose right now, this moment, to let go of. Right? We let the breath do the work. All we have to do is let go. Let go to any part of it that we are holding on to. And then the breath does the rest. The breath allowing it again to fill us with energy and life force and power, and to continue cleansing as it exhales, taking anything that we have outgrown, that no longer serves us, anything that we have outgrown and are ready to shed, like an old snake skin that can no longer contain us. And we do that a couple of more times. Letting go. One more time deeply. And ready when you are, you can gently begin to bring yourselves back. And moving slowly. Opening your eyes when you're ready.
That was great. That was really great, and we're going to take that out as a download for anyone who comes to the website. That was really fantastic. I tried to keep my eyes open for those of you who are just listening, and towards the end, I just couldn't anymore. This has been really fantastic. You have a TEDx talk that people can look for on YouTube. Is that right?
I do, on the power of the breath.
That's great. And he's got a book called Awakening the Soul of Power. We'll hook that up in the show notes. It's a great book on how to awaken your spirituality and find power. Is there anything
Yes.
else you were hoping to share that we didn't get to today?
Well, we didn't get into that whole conversation about power, because most of us have an ambivalent, conflicted relationship with it. Part of us wants it, part of us is afraid of it. And I think what we fear,
Yeah.
Dr. G, is that if we really stepped into all of who we are, that other people wouldn't be able to handle it, and that we might end up rejected and alone. And we also fear that if we really stepped into our power, that we might abuse it and cause harm. And no wonder. How many times have we witnessed abuses of power? And all we got to do
Yeah.
is turn on the news at any given day to witness at least one abuse of power.
Sure.
So what good-hearted person wants to do that? We don't want to do that. And so combined to that, add to that mix the fact that we've been conditioned to believe that power is a bad thing. With quotes like "power corrupts," absolute power corrupts absolutely. What they didn't tell us is that Lord Acton, who said that, was speaking specifically about political power, not personal power, which is what we're talking about. And
Yeah.
then add to the fact, that that we've been conditioned to believe that the emotions are weakness. And what a twisted thing. Like emotions, like we were saying, they're just energies. And then, by the way, which we also didn't get into, is this that we have connected the emotions with the feminine and labeled the
Mm-hmm.
feminine weakness, right? Especially for us guys, little boys don't cry. Why? Because only little girls cry. It's like, wait a minute. And if you want to talk, about power and courage and resilience, let's talk about the power of creation that resides in a female body. So this association of the feminine with weakness is totally false and made up. Um,
Well,
and
yeah,
and
but that's
so
because we live in a patriarchy, and
yeah,
there is a lot of history behind that, and how when written language started, we started using the left brain a lot more than the right brain, so we got out of
oh yeah,
creativity,
I
and
love that
that's
book.
pretty much alphabet
I
versus the
love
goddess.
the alphabet and the goddess. Yes, I love
Yeah, the
that book.
alphabet versus the goddess. Yeah. So
Yes,
I
yes.
think there's a lot of reasons for that, but if we can start to look at our emotions as a beacon to where we're supposed to go, and again, we're taught how to be factory workers. We're not taught how to manage. We're not taught any personal mastery, and I think that
Yes.
that's what when you read this book, Awakening the Soul of Power, you're going to really get an understanding of personal power in a way that is not, it's not as masculine as, say, a Tony Robbins sort of approach. He talks about personal power as well, but there's a lot more power that we have access to when we are able to connect with our breath, observe ourselves, and then also access the divine.
Yes. And the book is for everybody, but it has a particular message about women's empowerment. And
I
it's not
love
to
that.
idealize women, it's not to put women up on a pedestal. Women also abuse power, for sure.
Mm.
But it's because, and it's certainly not to give women more crap that they have to clean up in this world.
Yeah.
But it's because of what you're saying. For the last several thousand years of patriarchy, we've been running very off kilter, very off balance between the masculine and the feminine energies that course through every one of us, no matter what
Yeah.
kind of body we're in. And that's what colors our relationship to the world and to life. So when women are in 50% of power in this world, we're going to have a very different relationship to war and poverty and hunger and social justice and wealth distribution and how we treat the environment, etc. So
I love
that's
that.
why it's for everybody, but it has a particular message for women. And it's about how do we step into power in a way that's not about hierarchy, control, fear, force, domination. How do we step into power in a way that doesn't require that we push anybody down, step on them in order for us to feel
I
powerful?
love that. Where can people find you?
The book is available at your local bookstore if you want to support them, and it's
Uh
also
huh.
on Amazon. And and by the way, I got a great endorsement from Gloria Estefan, the music
Yay.
music icon. I know, I still
I
can't get
love
over that.
her.
I love her. And in terms of reaching me, probably my website is best, soulfulpower.com. From there, they
Awesome.
can get to my social media. And for your audience, Dr. G, if they'll go to soulfulpower.com and get on my email list, then we know how easy it is to click unsubscribe at any point if it doesn't work for you. But just for
Yeah.
getting on my email list, they'll get a sample chapter from the book about what it means to
Wow.
live heroically in the 21st century. They'll get some power practices that are designed to apply some of the concepts and the teachings to our lives. So they don't stay at the level of teaching and information because we don't need more information. We've got information overload. What we need is
Yeah.
transformation. And that's what comes from applying, from integrating the concepts and the teachings into our lives. And then they'll also get a guided meditation, sort of like the one we did earlier, um,
Yeah.
but with a teaching about trust. And it's focused on trust, which I created last year in the middle of the pandemic to help us move into a more trusting place in these
Mm.
times of chaos and uncertainty.
I love it. Well, Christian, thanks so much for coming onto the Menopause Movement podcast today. I really appreciate you. And everybody go and get his book and go sign up for his mailing list so you can get the guided meditation. And thanks again.
Dr. G, thank you so much for having me on the show. I love the conversation, and I know you and I could keep talking for a couple more hours.
I'm sure.
Um,
I hope to
and
have you back again.
I would love to, and we wouldn't run out of
Yeah,
stuff to talk about.
never.
And so many points of confluence in our teachings. I love Yogananda too. That
Yeah,
was one of my first
yeah,
spiritual books that I read too.
yeah. It's
So
awesome.
anyway, and thanks for having the show. I know in
Yeah,
your willingness to do so, you so many lives are impacted and touched. So
oh,
thank you
thanks.
again for from my personal perspective and from all of us.
Did you know that menopause is not a medical condition? Most doctors don't know this either. I like to say that menopause is the privilege of a long life. And to really take hold of our lives in menopause, we have to unlearn what society and the medical establishment has told us about menopause. Thanks so much for being a part of the menopause movement.